Hi. I think I've already kind of introduced myself to everyone who's here in person, but I'm Ted Morrissey, and I'm a writer, and I'm also the publisher of 12 Winters Press. So Joan has asked me to talk a little bit about publishing. I think both at the sort of story level, poem level, maybe to magazines, but also if you have a book, how do you get that out into the world? So I think that's what I'm here to talk about. Hopefully that's what you had in mind. So,
Yes, sounds perfect.
did you want to do anything prior to?
Yeah, I'll do a quick welcome.
Okay.
We have a small group in person. There's 4 of us, along with Dr. Morrissey. And it looks like we have 4 people online. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. And I just need to ask, how's James doing?
Yeah, I see. Is that James up there?
Yeah.
I'm doing good.
All right, fantastic. Glad you could join us this morning. Usually we do an introduction and I give a prompt. And the prompt for today was your favorite spring flower. We're all hoping, right? So I'm going to go ahead. I'm Joan McGrath. And my favorite spring flower is the daffodil, mainly because I love yellow. So if you tell me here, and then we'll take the Zoom people. But Chuck, what's your favorite spring flower?
Lilac, definitely. I love the smell of lilacs. The tragedy is they have such a short bloom period.
Okay, so Chuck feels that lilacs are his favorite because of the smell and but they have a short life. There's Lombard, Illinois, which is up near Chicago, is the lilacia capital of Illinois, and they do a festival, and they have Lilacia Park, and you should get up there when they're in bloom because it is fabulous. Mary?
Well, I like so many of them. I guess I would say the dogwood.
Mary
Yes.
says dogwood is her favorite flower.
My hometown of Quincy has a dogwood festival. It's a little later. It's first or second weekend of May, but
That's still spring, yeah. First or second weekend of May, Quincy has the Dogwood
Yes.
Festival. Oh, hey, we're learning all these places we can go visit. Cindy,
Toss up between daffodils and tulips. So since you said daffodils, I'll go with tulips.
okay, so her favorite spring flower is tulips. And we're very happy to have you with us today. Can we go online and see who is up there? Let's start with Nancy.
I would go with peonies. We had a row of them in our backyard, and I always look forward to their blooming.
Okay, so Nancy likes peonies. I must tell you, you know my experience with Alaska. Fairbanks, Alaska has become overrun with people growing peonies. They're doing them in hothouses, and they are always for sale, and they're shipping them all over the world. So Nancy, you should get up there and see those gorgeous peonies. Kathy?
Yeah, I also like daffodils, and unlike you, Joan, I hate the color yellow, but daffodils is the one exception, and I think it's because of the contrast between the gray, dark winter, and then when you see that bright yellow come up in the spring, it's so beautiful. So that's the only yellow thing I like.
Okay, James.
No, I'm not copycatting, but I grew up with peonies also. Really like peonies. They're short-lived, but really.
Then I guess you're married to the right person. Carla?
Yeah.
I don't think Carla is going to join us.
Taking a break. Getting a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Okay. Today we have asked Dr. Ted Morrissey to come speak with us about publishing. Not all of us are into publishing our work, but some of us would like to consider of various ways, maybe just leaving it for future family members to read about our thoughts, our adventures, and maybe to go beyond family and putting it out there to a bigger audience. So, Dr. Morrissey, I'm going to let you, I know you taught in Williamsville, I know you're teaching here, but I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, all right, thanks. Well, thank you, Joan and the Scribes group for inviting me. I taught high school English for 38 years until last year. And then, meanwhile, for about 23 of those years, simultaneously, I taught in various adjunct situations. I taught at Benedictine for a number of years, and then I taught at University of Illinois Springfield for 6 years in their first year writing program. And then since 2016, I've been teaching online for Lindenwood University in their MFA program. And I get to just design my own classes, and it's just all online with a bunch of really smart, enthusiastic human beings, and that's a great teaching. It's a great teaching situation. I say it's like getting paid to have pen pals with weirdly similar interests. And then this semester, I have been out here at Lincoln Land teaching humanities class. So I've been a writer my whole life. Even as a little kid, I remember writing stories and notebooks and thinking of myself as a writer. When I was in high school, I started writing for the local newspaper, and one of the big thrills in life was having the newspaper story come out with my byline, and that really got me hooked on writing and publishing. But then in college, I kind of got away from journalism and became much more interested in writing fiction. And so that's been my main focus for the last, 30 years or something like that. Writing novels, particularly short stories. I have started writing some poetry. So I've written some poems in the last few years. I kind of do that periodically. And you mentioned the favorite flower. I was thinking, I don't necessarily have a favorite flower for the sorts of reasons apparently most of you do, yellow or not yellow. But I do often write about the daffodil, but that's because of its alliterative qualities. And so I love that double D sound, and it just really, I'm more of a language guy. I like novels and stories that focus more on language than on plot and character. So I'm a little bit of a minority on that. But anyway, just to come back to this, so I've edited a couple of different literary journals. I had my own literary journal called A Summer's Reading when I first moved to Springfield about 24 years ago. And I did that for 7 years, and then I stopped publishing that when Benedictine started Quiddity, which was a literary journal that had a public radio component as well. I was one of the founding editors of Quiddity. I mainly handled the print journal, and then my colleague Joanna Beth Tweedy handled the radio stuff, although we all kind of contributed to everything. It was really a fun, exciting time to be involved in that. And then I kind of got away from the literary journal thing, but then last year, after I retired from teaching full-time, I expanded my 12 Winters press operation because in 2012, I started my own press, 12 Winters. And so since then, I've been publishing not only my own work, but the work of others as well, in large part because it's just so darn difficult to find a publisher, quite honestly, especially if you have a book you're trying to publish. And then I have had 4 books published with other presses besides mine, and it's always some various level of frustrating. So I just decided I'd prefer to do my own thing. And so I've been doing that since 2012, and I'm pretty much a one-man band. I acquire the books, I write the contracts, I design and lay out the books, I do the covers, I do most of the artwork for the books. Sometimes I commission artwork from others, but lately I've had a little more confidence in my abilities as an artist, so I've been doing a little more of my own. And so I've been doing that since 2012, and then like I said, last year with a little more time on my hands, I started 12 Winters Journal and 12 Winters Miscellany, and they are online components, and we publish narrative and then we publish nonfiction through the Miscellany. And so I've been doing that, and that's a really cool experience too, because it doesn't cost a thing, and we get to publish all kinds of different material, and we have writers from all over the world that we are getting their work out there. So I really enjoy the online publishing as a kind of extension of both the the print stuff. We also do ebooks, of course, mainly Kindle now. I used to try and do a variety of e-texts, but for the last few years, I've mainly just focused on Kindle because they've got kind of the lion's share of the market, to be sure. So anyway, based on all that, I've prepared a handout, and folks at home, I'll have to forward it to Joan, and maybe she can get it to you. But I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to access the internet or not, so I did the old-fashioned handout. But I just have some things I want to cover because Joan wanted me to talk about a really wide variety of publishing. I mean, when she originally contacted me, I think she was talking about me coming here for like 15 minutes, and I don't even know what I could say in 15 minutes. So she graciously gave me an hour to talk. But quite honestly, if you're looking at the handout, each of these bullet points could be probably an hour's discussion in themselves, and that would still only be scratching the surface, because publishing, I mean, it means a lot of things, and I'm going to try to touch on several of those things. But it's especially because of online, because of ebooks, print books, hardcover editions, and all that sort of thing. Each one of those is a different animal to try to tackle, and then it also is changing constantly. So just last night, I was throwing together this handout, and I kind of double checked some things here and there on this website and the other to discover that there have been some changes since I, first look or last looked at them just weeks ago or months ago or something. So it's a fast changing kind of topic. But on the other hand, I think it's important to realize that nobody is going to get hurt if you do something wrong trying to publish. It's not like we're trying to break atoms or something here, right? So I think a lot of people hesitate to get their work out into the world or to try to do publishing or self-publishing because, what if I don't do it right? I don't know how to do it. I'm pretty much self-taught now. I've been teaching myself for 4 decades, so by now I know a little bit about it. But I'm constantly learning new things and constantly having to try new things, and it's just that's kind of part of the fun of it too, I think. So it's just kind of an exciting world to be involved in. So let me just kind of go through this handout and kind of preview what I'm going to talk about. Then I'll come back and do more individually. And then also after I go through the handout, I'll stop for a second, see if anybody at home or here has any, kind of initial questions, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So at the very top of this, I've listed several websites. I've got actually more websites than this that I manage, some more than others. TedMorsey.com is my primary website, and that's kind of my writing life. So all of my books and stories and poems, and I also write nonfiction, and I do reviews, and I write translations. So I do all kinds of stuff. But there's links basically to all that stuff through my TedMorsey.com site. Ted Morsey blog is just my basic kind of WordPress blog. I started it years and years ago because I oftentimes want to share my wisdom with the world, and this is a good way of doing it. And I write about all kinds of things. I write reviews of plays, like, for example, the Illinois Shakespeare Festival is going to get underway here, in a couple of months. And every summer I go to all the productions and I write reviews of them and post them on my blog. And now it's gotten to the point where the festival looks forward to my reviews, and they post them on their website, which is pretty cool. I really appreciate that. But just anything that's kind of on my mind that I want to write about, I post on 12 Winters blog. 12winters.com is my press's site, but like I said, we've also expanded and have 12 Winters Journal and 12 Winters Miscellany. But 12winters.com is where one would go to find out about the press and about the online journals. Obviously, there's links on where to acquire the books. I brought several books with me just because I want to kind of talk a little bit about what you can expect to get from these various entities, if you go this route versus that route. But 12winters.com is my main press site. The tunnel at 25.com. My main literary interest, or my main scholarly interest, I should say, and my literary idol is a writer named William H. Gass, who, I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, but he was a professor at Wash U for a number of years, so we associate him with St. Louis, but really he was born in North Dakota. He taught at Purdue for a number of years. He taught at U of I, Champaign, I think 1 year. So he kind of was all over the Midwest, but we mainly associate him with Wash U. But his great novel, The Tunnel, which took him 26 years to write, the first year of the pandemic, it turned 25. And so I thought, let's have a symposium on William Gass's The Tunnel. Not nearly enough people read it. Because of it being, though, during the pandemic and also just being easier logistically, I decided to have an online symposium. So I established the tunnel at 25.com, and I invited Gass people from around the world to contribute to it. So it has a bunch of articles, some scholarly, some kind of informal, they're kind of all over the map in terms of style, but all people kind of giving their take on the tunnel and in some cases how it affected them. But that was a really neat project. I wanted to include it here because I think a lot of people out there may be interested in doing like anthologies. I know like sometimes the Springfield Writers and Poets group like to do like a collection of poetry or something. And doing it via a web-based approach and having like a collection of material on a website is really an easy way to do it. And it's, you can pay for a website. I purchased one that's a little bit fancier pants, but they can be literally free, and literally anyone in the world or galaxy, I like to think of aliens reading my stuff out there, can access it. So I think it's a really good option for a lot of people. And then I've included my email address here, just in case you do have any questions after the fact. I'm happy to field questions. And unlike a lawyer, I will not charge you $250 an hour to answer a simple question. All right. I also brought business cards, so I'll those are available too, but basically the same information as I've got here. All right, so let me stop there. I was going to go through the whole Hannah here real quickly and then come back and hit things in more detail, but I said I'd stop for a second, see if anybody had any initial questions. Maybe now's a good time. Does anyone at home or here just have any initial questions about anything I've said so far? Let me know if I'm rambling too fast too. I have so much to say. Sometimes I like a snowball going downhill. I just get faster and faster and faster. So one of the things that you may be interested in is getting your poems, your short stories, maybe they're excerpts of novels, maybe they're nonfictions, maybe they're essays or memoir or something. Maybe you've been writing them and maybe you're interested in getting them out into the world. And there are thousands and thousands of potential outlets out there. I've got 3 bullet points here. One says duotrope.com, which is probably the best source for finding places to send your work. It is a subscription service, and so there's a little bit of cost to it, but if you're really interested in doing it, it's more than cost effective. But I'll come back, like I said, talk about each of these in more detail. Newpages.com is a great site to find places that are looking for work. Submittable.com they don't publish anything, but most journals and publishers now use Submittable as sort of their online portal to get material. So you have to have a Submittable account in order to send them stories and poems and things. So, and it's free for publishers and magazines pay a fee, but for the writer, it's free. When it comes to web publishing, I'll talk a little bit about WordPress and Weebly, which I don't frankly know very much about. I'm a WordPress guy just by habit, but I can talk about the process a little bit there. When it comes to self-publishing books, and I'm talking ebooks and paperbacks and hardcover editions, I'll talk a little bit about KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, which is an Amazon company. Ingram Sparks, which is part of the Ingram network. And I don't actually use Ingram Spark. I use Lightning Source, which is part of the Ingram network, but Ingram Spark is kind of their counterpart to KDP. BookBaby does similar kinds of things to both KDP and Ingram Spark. And then Smashwords is a site that a lot of people use. It's all ebooks, but in a variety of formats, way more variety of formats than what I produce ebooks in, but a lot of people use Smashwords. Some useful vocabulary. All of the book publishers I'm going to talk about are POD or print-on-demand publishers, meaning that each individual book isn't printed until somebody buys it. unlike the traditional publishing model where a publisher would have an initial print run, which might be in the thousands or hundreds of thousands, depending on how big the publisher is. And then those books are warehoused somewhere, and then they are distributed somehow or another. There's lots of different ways of doing that. But when that was the only way of getting books published, then it was much more difficult for an individual author to publish their work, because you had to have a publisher who had enough funds that they could afford the initial press run of however many thousand or hundreds of thousands or whatever it might be. And then, like I said, they were warehoused somewhere. And so most individual, people, unless they were, a Getty or some other, an Astor or something, they didn't have the means to have 10,000 books printed, not to mention where would they keep them in the meantime. But I say a few years ago, let's say 15 years ago or so, this print on demand became a thing where you have all these different services where they keep the computer files of your book in their system, and then as people order the book, either you as the author order a book, or they order the book on Amazon or wherever they might order it, they literally print that one book and they send it out, or if it's 5 books or if it's 20 books or whatever it is. It's much more expensive per book, but it's the only way to really do it as a small press, because I don't have the funds to spend several $1,000s doing a print run of every book that I publish, especially because, frankly, the odds of very many people buying it are pretty slim, quite honestly. But also, I just don't have I live in a pretty small house, and so where am I going to keep tens of thousands of books? There are some independent warehouse distributors out there that you can enlist their services. So that's a whole other thing. But I've never wanted to do that. So POD, or print on demand, is something you'll see. PDF, or portable document format. When you do upload material to a book publisher, they generally always want it in PDF format. I use Adobe InDesign to design my books. It's a little more sophisticated, but although the way I use it is pretty simple, I use just a very small percentage of what is possible to do with it. But you could just use a Word now. You can save things in PDF format, so it wouldn't have to be something that fancy. And then I also included JPEG, which you probably are familiar with, but that's just a type of image. There are all kinds of ways that photos or images can be saved, JPEGs and TIFFs and PNGs and so forth. And in most places, we'll actually use a variety of those, but the JPEG seems pretty universal. So if you upload like a cover image for a Kindle book or something like that, they want it as a JPEG image, so you have to convert it to JPEG if it isn't already in JPEG, that kind of thing. So I'll kind of get to the bottom here. It says, beware of scammers. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I shouldn't wait till the end to talk about that. It does cost money to get your stuff published. If you are submitting stuff to online journals, oftentimes there's a reading fee, $3, $4, $5. If you're submitting your stuff to a contest in hopes that you'll be a winner or a finalist, and maybe your poem or your story will be included in some sort of contest anthology, that usually is $15, $20, $25, something like that. If you self-publish a book, obviously there's going to be a cost involved in that. Amazon is actually free. You have to buy the books once they're available, obviously, but Ingram actually charges money to house the files and to create the proofs and all that stuff. So there's a little bit of cost involved there, but it's pretty limited. But there are a bunch of places out there that are out to make money off of you, and they will happily publish your book for hundreds or thousands of dollars, but they're not really legit. You can get the same services for a lot less money. They're just trying to take advantage of novice authors. So if you ever go to a site and they say they'll do all these wonderful things for you and they'll get your book in all these bookstores and yada yada yada, but you got to give them $2,000 or $15,000 or whatever it might be. Yeah, don't do it. It's not a real thing. And then the last part here. I used to be under the impression that you wrote, and presumably you eventually could write fairly well. You publish stuff. You publish a book eventually. It would end up in libraries and in bookstores, and people would read it, including Oprah perhaps, and life would be wonderful. you'd be invited to talk to groups, like Scribes, and it would be great. But the fact of the matter is, libraries and bookstores, of course, were basically down to Barnes and Noble, plus in bigger cities, some independent bookstores, but they don't give shelf space to unknown authors. I mean, very, very rarely do they give up shelf space, especially bookstores. Libraries sometimes are a little more amenable to new authors, but they want plenty of space for the books they know we're going to sell. And and of course, one of the reasons that unknown authors are unknown is because libraries and bookstores don't purchase their stuff and don't promote them. But it's kind of the catch-22 out there. But anyway, I just to be just be realistic. Obviously, some things catch fire online and word of mouth and so forth. Maybe it'll go viral if you publish a book, and that would be wonderful. But the odds are, I don't know if I've ever had a book read by more than maybe 30 or 40 people. I kind of joke, my mom passed away a couple years ago, and 50% of my fan base went with her. It's just we live in a very weird time where the mechanical means, the technical means of producing material has never been easier, but we also live in a time where there are fewer and fewer and fewer readers. So literally, there are more people writing and publishing books than there are people reading books, and so I think that's been by far the biggest challenge of my publishing life. Writing the stuff obviously is challenging. Publishing it is challenging, but getting people to read it, that overshadows the challenge of all the other stuff. I don't know how to do it. I tell authors who I publish, I say, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. I mean, I've tried literally everything that I can think of. And just to give you an idea, finally, about 3 years ago, I had a little bit of money at my disposal. I got remarried. The kids were finally all out of college, and we were bringing in a decent income. So for the first time in my writing life, I had a little bit of liquid cash to spend on advertising and promotion, because I thought, well, maybe that's why. I've never really been able to go full bore with all that. And so over about a 3-year period, I think I spent about $25,000 buying ads, entering contests, buying reviews. Kirkus Reviews, Publishers Weekly, all those places, they don't write reviews for free. You've got to buy them, and they're several $100s each. And I think a lot of authors don't realize that, and I didn't realize that. So that isn't something I was doing up until a few years ago. So I started doing that kind of thing. And out of that, say $25,000, maybe $20 worth of book sales, if I'm, maybe.
Wow.
Now that I'm retired, I'd really like to get that money back. But at least I know now, right? I know that that wasn't what was holding my books back. It was the fact nobody's reading, right? So with all of that, let me kind of go through and give you a little bit more info and see if you have some specific questions. So going back to publishing poems, short stories, novel excerpts, memoir pieces, essays, whatever it might be. Again, there are thousands and thousands of little publishers, little presses, little publishers, little magazines, whatever you want to call them out there. Most of them, I suppose, are associated with universities. They're, kind of the literary journal kind of things, but not all of them, because of the advent of print on demand and online publishing. There are a lot of just, people who aren't associated with universities or colleges who just start their own journals and things. But the how you find them is a little bit tricky sometimes. So like a Duotrope is a really good service. It provides a database, a really good database. So you can go into their database, their search engine, and you can say, okay, you're looking for publishers of short stories. Maybe you can limit it to, maybe you've written a vampire story, so you can limit it to just publishers who say they publish that kind of fiction. Length, you can limit it to this versus that. You can limit it to online journals or print or both, or whatever you want to do. Excuse me. So anyway, they've got a really, nice database that has all kinds of options you can use to really target what you've written and who specifically says they published that. And so then you put in all the criteria and you hit return or whatever. And you tell them a typewriter kit, I used to say return. And so you get this list. But even if you give it a dozen very, very specific criteria, you'll be surprised. You'll still get dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of magazines out there, or small press publishers, anthology publishers, whatever you want to call them, who are looking for that. They only publish that. They only publish, fairy stories. They only publish stories about daffodils, or whatever it might be. Now, a lot of publishers increasingly have demographic restraints, and they only want to publish people who fit into a particular demographic, or they only want to publish people who fit into a particular geographic area. And so obviously that's one of the things you want to be on the lookout for. If you fit the demographic that they're aiming at, great, obviously, because that limits your competition. But at the same time, if you don't fit their demographic, obviously it's going to be a big waste of time to send them stuff, or potentially embarrassing if they accept your poem and then you discover, oops, they only publish people, born in Spain or something, and I wasn't born in Spain. So anyway, you want to look at all of that. And that leads me to another point I guess I should make. All of these different places have what they call writer's guidelines. And that probably should have been one of my vocabulary terms. Writer's guidelines, and these are a list of how they want material submitted to them. Now, when it comes to short stories or novel excerpts and poems and sending them to literary journals, it's pretty standard. Some places have some idiosyncratic do's and don'ts. But by and large, there are some basic kind of rules that if you follow, it pretty much is going to work for everybody. But in those writer's guidelines, they say things like if simultaneous submissions are okay. Some journals only let you submit your story or poem to them exclusively, and you have to wait until they say yes or no before you can send it to somebody else. That's a rarer thing these days. So most journals and most publishers allow what are called simultaneous submissions, where you can send the same poems or the same stories to a dozen or 50 or 500 publishers. But the deal is that if you get accepted somewhere, that you immediately stop what you're doing, and go and use Submittable or use email or however it works for that particular journal, and let them know, okay, take that out of the inbox, because it's now going to be published elsewhere. You don't have to tell them where. Sometimes they're kind of friendly and they ask you where, just to be nice or something. But usually that's all they need to know is just stop considering it, because what you don't want to do is have something accepted, not withdraw it from all the different places that you've submitted it, and then 6 months later have an editor come and say, hey, congratulations, we want to publish your poem, and say, oh, sorry, it's already been published here or there, because that's the other part of the deal. Most places, they want to publish it for the first time. They want to be the original publisher of that poem or that story or whatever it is. Some will do reprints. Some will let you submit something that's already been published elsewhere, and that's one of those criteria you can put in on the Submittable database if a magazine accepts reprints. So that way, even if you've got something that's already been published somewhere, you can send it to them, and it's not a big deal. So there's a lot of specific things that each journal may want. Now, I mentioned that Submittable was the main way that most journals now are taking material, but there are still a lot of journals, because Submittable costs magazines some money. I used to use it, and I don't anymore because of the cost of it. I used to use it as a publisher, and I don't anymore because of the cost of it. But because of that, a lot of them still just use email. So they want you to send them email submissions, and so they might have specific guidelines about what to put in the subject line to let them know it's a fiction versus a poem versus nonfiction or something like that. So again, they might have very specific ways they want you to label it. Some want you to include an attachment with the email. Some don't want attachments because they don't want viruses. So you're supposed to copy and paste the story or the poems into the email body itself. Some want you to write a little bio in the email, but then attach this. So there's just all kinds of different possibilities. But you just want to kind of follow and do whatever they ask you to do. And like I said, Duotrope is very good. The other service that Duotrope offers, which is very useful to me because I'm always trying to get my stuff published, is a weekly email newsletter. And you can set it up to, if you only write fiction, they will send you a weekly email newsletter to let you know which magazines have opened up to submissions, which ones have closed, which ones are having themed calls for, stuff. Maybe they want poems about spring flowers, and so that'll be posted in the email. They also now include literary agents who are open to new clients. So that's kind of a nice service if you're trying to get that as part of your thing. And like I said, you can specifically make it for fiction. Since I started writing poetry a few years ago, I kind of expanded that. So now I get a joint email that includes both fiction and poetry publishers. And then you got to kind of pay attention. Is this a fiction, or is it a poet, or is it both, or whatever it might be? But very, very useful. Like, it's not super expensive. I mean, it's like $5 a month or something. So when I say subscription, it's not like getting, a $500 thing or whatever. It's, $5 a month or something like that. Now, newpages.com is free. It's just a website out there. And they have all kinds of stuff they offer on their site, but they also have calls for submissions. So if you're a publisher and a magazine publisher, a book publisher, whatever it might be, you can contact New Pages and you can get a little, it's kind of like a classified ad, kind of like the old days. Those of us who used to read newspapers look at classified ads. And so it'll list, in one section, all of the different different places that at the time are looking for submissions. Because a lot of magazines, like I said, are associated with universities. So oftentimes they shut down in the summertime because nobody's around, and so they don't read in the summertime. Other journals, just to kind of cut down on the amount of stuff they get, they only accept submissions for maybe 3 months at a time, and then they close for 3 months or 2 months or a month or whatever, then open up for 3 months. So everything's a little bit different. But like I said, New Pages and both Duotrope do a good job of letting you know who's looking now, who's closed now, so you don't waste your time or whatever. New Pages also lists all the different literary journals that are out there and publishers, alphabetically. Also, they have their own little database you can use. So sometimes I just try to get lucky in the sense of I'll just go to a magazine's website, and even though it hasn't been told to me in Duotrope or something that they're looking for submissions, I'll just see. I'll just go to their submissions page, and sometimes it'll say that it's open, sometimes it'll say that it's closed. But so even though Duotrope and New Pages are really, really good, they still aren't absolutely exhaustive because nobody can be. And so you can just kind of go through. I've been trying to get like the new thing I'm working on. I mean, I've always wanted to get stuff published in like the kind of upper tier literary journals, and I don't know, it's almost like it's kind of like a hobby now. It's like trying to bowl 300 game, and bowling. It really won't change the world. It won't make you any different as a human being, but it's just a challenge. So I kind of try to challenge myself as a writer to try to get stuff in sort of this upper tier level of journals or whatever. And so one of the things I'll do, I have like a copy of like the, Pushcart Prize stories or whatever, which is a prestigious, publisher of short stories. And in the back, they list all of the different journals that nominated stories. And usually this is kind of the creme de la creme. So I'll just kind of go to the back and just kind of go through and just start looking and seeing who, go to their website, see if they're looking for submissions right now, and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it. But again, if you're looking to publish short stories, shorter pieces, poems, and that kind of thing, Duotrope and New Pages are probably your best bet. And like I said, you're pretty shortly going to have to get a submittable, presence if you're going to submit stuff. Again, not everybody uses submittable, but more and more people do. And so you're going to need to have that so that when you go there and it says submit via submittable, you've already got it, set up, so you can just, immediately do that. So there's a lot of information right there, and I've just skimmed the surface of that particular topic. Does anybody have any specific questions or anything that I said that was particularly confusing?
This handout, you can send to me and I can send out to the group
Yes.
with all the
Yes.
actual names of everything.
Yeah. In fact,
So-
I could take a second to do it now. I don't know if you want to send.
No, that's okay. I think we can send it out.
Okay. So that's, like I said, if you got some shorter stuff you want to publish. Now, the range of that, I mean, on the one hand, stuff online is available to everyone, whether everyone reads it or not. That's a whole nother issue. Also, sometimes web publishers, they stop publishing, right? Your thing is online for a year or 2 or 5 years, and then they stop, and so they no longer renew the subscription to their website, and so it just disappears. So sometimes, I mean, it's a temporary kind of thing. Whereas if your poem or story or something appears in a printed journal, again, who reads it? That's not quite clear, but at least it's probably out there for for the duration, right? So there's a little more I don't know, sustainability or something if you publish in a print journal. So web publishing, just very briefly. So if you have just things you want to say to the world, and you don't want to go through the hassle of submitting it to an editor, waiting for them to do a thumbs up or thumbs down and pay the money for a reading fee or to whatever it might be, you can just set up a free website on web. Like I said, WordPress is what I've always used. Weebly does the same kind of thing, and there's probably a dozen, if not 200 other places out there that do the same sort of thing. I used to have a Blogger account, and so Blogger I think still exists, so that would be a thing. Some people do Tumblr. That used to be kind of in vogue for a while, but WordPress is a site you go to, and you can just set up a web page. And they have templates, so you don't have to be a web designer. You just choose whatever template you want to use, and you just go to town. You just start publishing stuff. Now you can get as sophisticated as you want. You can purchase somewhat more sophisticated, more artsy kinds of websites, and so there is maybe a little bit of a fee for that if you want to go a little bit upper scale. If you are into web design, you can open up the HTML script. That's the web script, and I do sometimes. I have taught myself a little bit of that stuff, and so once in a while I will actually venture into HTML land and try to do something a little bit fancier. But for the most part, the templates are so easy to use that you can just get started, and then you just publish your stuff. If you want to publish short stories or novels or poems or you have essays or whatever. Like I say, I use my Ted Morrissey blog to publish reviews of theatrical stuff. I know a lot of people who use their blog to publish book reviews because they have a book they've read that they really like, and so they do it there instead of on Goodreads or Amazon, or maybe they do it all three places or whatever. A lot of people post pictures and they'll go on vacation somewhere. They want to have like a kind of a travel log, so they'll have a website where they kind of use that as their travel log, and their family can kind of keep track of their adventure to Yosemite and that kind of thing. So really the sky is the limit in terms of what you can publish, and again, there's nobody to say you can't do it. When you're setting up your website, I think there are questions about the content. Is this going to be kind of a G-rated website or PG-13 or NC-17 or what's it going to be? So that way, the search engines, when they're searching, that affects how easily they can find it. That gives people an idea what they're going to be looking at when they look at it. So I think there is some trying to tailor it to particular audiences, but generally speaking, you can publish whatever you want to publish. So, like I said, that's been the big innovation. Now, a lot of the stuff I publish on my blog, you get data, and it says, X number of people have looked at it today, or you can get like, well, how many people looked at it this week, how many people looked at it this year. If it's a 5-year-old blog post, you can get the data for all 5 years. And I've had a few posts that have sort of gone viral, and thousands of people have read them and commented on them. But that's pretty unusual. Most things get dozens of views, maybe hundreds of views over a number of months or years or something. And again, if anyone clicks on it, that registers as a view. Whether they actually read it, to any depth, that's a whole other issue. But it certainly is a possibility. And like I said, a lot of groups like Scribes could start their own Scribes journal, or Scribbles or something like that, and just get a free web, WordPress page or Weebly or whatever it might be, and just publish members' stuff, and you don't have to deal with finicky editors. You don't have to pay money necessarily. I mean, if you wanted to, I think upgrade to a little bit fancier pants to a website, you certainly could, but it's not necessary. it's just out there for all the world to see. And you can do, I mean, you can do all kinds of things. You could publish online, but you could also create a little PDF booklet of poems or whatever, and put that as an attachment to your website so people could either read it online or they could download the PDF and print it out at home and have their own kind of journal that way if they prefer print. Again, the possibilities are endless. I've been using YouTube a lot. In fact, I'm going to post this thing on my YouTube channel just to get things out there in the world even more. So, you could include videos, obviously, on your website. Person reading their own poem as opposed to just printing the poem itself or whatever. There's a few journals that do that. You go there and you can read it, but they've also had the authors and the poets record themselves reading their material, and then you can click on it and you can listen to them reading it. We used to do that at Quiddity partly because of the NPR angle too, and it was really fascinating because we'd have a poem, for example, that all the editors just loved and had kind of a sense of this is what the poem is about, and we'd invite the poet to submit an audio of themselves reading it, and they would send it to us, and then you listen to them read it. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's an entirely different poem, because they emphasize the words differently, their pacing is different. And I'm not saying we loved it more or loved it less, but the way someone reads material has a big impact on how you read it, how you listen to it, and so forth. So that's kind of a cool thing to do, I think, especially with poetry, but it certainly is true of any kind of writing, I think. So lots and lots of possibilities in terms of WordPress and Weebly and other Blogger and Tumblr and 1,000 others, I'm sure. Any questions about that in particular? Okay, so I guess we'll get to the big enchilada here. So book publishing.
Let me check these. There are some things mentioned in
Oh,
chat.
we got some chat going on here? Okay.
What have you learned from doing a blog?
What have I learned from doing a blog? Well, I guess I've learned just how it can kind of reach places, because one of the data points you get when you look at your metadata is the different countries where people were when they, looked at your stuff. And so that's always kind of cool to see that people in Luxembourg and China and Australia or wherever, were looking at your material. Again, how deeply they read it, not necessarily. Some of my blog posts that have gone pretty viral, and I'll just tell you, because I'm a teacher. One of the things that ruined teaching for so many teachers is the Danielson framework for evaluating teachers. And so I went on kind of a one-person mission to try to expose the evils of the Danielson framework. So I published several blog posts about that, and one in particular in which the creator of the Danielson framework, Charlotte Danielson, even criticized her own framework. That went really viral, and so I had a lot of comments. So teachers from literally all over the world, particularly the United States, though, were commenting, and so I had this really interesting ongoing dialogue with people from all over the country. Certainly, like I said, there were people from Canada and from other countries as well. Teachers mainly who also had been hit by the Danielson framework bus. And so we were all just kind of sharing, thoughts and about that. So connecting with others, I think, is probably the coolest thing about a blog, and learning how much you can connect with people, I guess, would be a better answer to your specific question.
Next question. Have you had any copyright issues, others plagiarizing work, especially e-publishing?
I haven't. Like I said, my biggest problem is getting people to read it. Frankly, if someone, stole some of my stuff, I'd probably be pretty happy about it, because someone at least is reading it. Today I brought all these books here, and I was over at Trotter, first of all, and I had to go to the restroom, and so, I just left the books lying in the hallway there, and normally you would worry about people stealing. I hope someone steals them. So no, I have not, to my knowledge anyway. I don't go through Library of Congress. I started doing that. Man, that is a hassle and a half. And you have copyright as soon as you publish something. So I do what's called it's sexist, but poor person's copyright. And I do copyright, and I say this is copyrighted. And so, if someone obviously just took one of my books and put their name on it, and suddenly, it was being optioned for film or something. I obviously would get a lawyer and try to do something about that. But no, I haven't had any copyright issues. Maybe, if a high school student somewhere, downloads some essay of mine online and tries to turn it into their English teacher, I have no idea. I doubt that that's happened. But no, like I said, my biggest problem, and I think the problem of most authors, is getting people to read your stuff. It's not having people steal your stuff.
Next question. What do you see as the current hot trends in publishing subject matter?
Boy, I wish I knew. No, YA literature, young adult literature, is one of the few areas that is sort of, waxing instead of waning, and particularly YA literature aimed at young teenage girls. So that's the one kind of hot area. Other than that, it's hard really to say. And one of the difficulties about book publishing is, let's say you just heard what I said there, and you thought, oh, okay, I've never written a YA book for a 13-year-old girl, but if that's what's trending now, I'll do it. And so you take the next 6 months writing a book, or maybe the next year, or however long, you try to find an agent, try to find a publisher, if maybe you do eventually. So long story short, it takes years to get a book into print. So maybe by the time the book comes out, that's no longer the thing. That's yesterday's news, right? So it's really hard to react to trends in publishing when you're writing books, because the trends change so much. And even though I do it pretty expeditiously because of being so small and doing pretty much all the work myself, and books do kind of get out into the world fairly quickly, or they can at least, compared to maybe a more commercial publisher, it's still very hard to keep up with trends and to anticipate trends and that kind of thing. One of the things you can do, if you're looking to publish short stories and poems and so forth, a lot of editors of journals will answer questions about what they're looking for, or kind of what they really liked that they've published. But I've also heard them say that they don't like to answer that question, because as soon as they do, they're suddenly overwhelmed with dog stories or cat stories, or whatever it might be, and so then they're sick of it. So they go from it being kind of the thing they're really into to being sick of it practically overnight. So I think it's really hard to. I like I said, I teach an MFA program, and my advice always to writers is to write what you love. It's a hard thing. It's difficult to get published. You're gonna, there's kind of a joke out there that says, write the kind of book that you want to read, and then the follow-up to that is, because you'll have to read it 75 times. And so, write what you love, and if you write, well enough, and I think if you put enough kind of heart and soul into it, you will find readers eventually. Maybe only 5, but you will find readers. So I think it's a little bit like a dog chasing its tail to try to write something that's trendy at the moment. But again, to answer your question, I think in publishing, the only kind of subgenre that is actually kind of on the rise is that young YA novel aimed at girls in particular. Yeah, it's a whole nother topic, but we young people don't read, by and large. And in fact, reading to them they're not just non-readers, they're like anti-readers. Reading to them is right in the same category with listening to accordion music, or making their clothes by hand or something. They just don't see how anyone could find enjoyment in it, let alone themselves. And so, I don't know where we're going to be in 10 years. I'm also a librarian. I didn't mention that, but for the last 23 years, I've been a part-time librarian at Sherman Public Library. And like the median age of our book patrons is like 75 or something. I feel like a really youthful guy when I'm in there on Saturdays, because, again, a lot of our readers who are avid readers are much, much older, and it's very unusual for teenagers to come in, other than if they have to do a book report or something. And people in their 20s and 30s, they just aren't reading. And then, again, kind of a side note, if you go to my blog, you can actually find, I also do a lot of conference presentations, and so I post those on my blog. You kind of asked what I posted on my blog. I kind of forgot about that, but I do post my conference presentation. I've done a couple of conference presentations about the state of reading, the condition of reading. And one of the stats I have in there is that in the United States, we're down to 5, actually I think it's now 4 actual commercial publishers. There's only 4 commercial publishers left in the United States. It seems like more because you go to Barnes and Noble, and if you look at the publishing names, you see all these different names, but it's like all these parent companies have bought all these smaller firms. And so there really are only, I think it's now 4, but for a few years it was only 5 commercial publishers, but they own all these smaller presses. They have different imprints, but oftentimes it's the same editorial team, it's the same graphic artists who are doing all the work, even though it's 5 or 6 different imprints. They're all feeding into the same publisher. So anyway, there's only like 4 or 5 commercial publishers. 85% of the book sales in the U.S. Can be attributed to about 24 authors. So you've got you got James Patterson publishing 6 books a week. And I'm not even kidding. I mean, that's literally true. I mean, and he doesn't even write his own books. He doesn't even pretend to write his own books. And then you have popular authors like I think Tom Clancy and I think Clive Cussler passed away a few years ago. Robert Parker passed away, and they're still publishing books all the time, posthumously.
V.C. Andrews
V.C.
died years ago,
Right.
and they're still publishing.
So basically, if you're not part of that 24 or so people who account for 85% of book sales, then you're one of those thousands and thousands of authors who are competing for that 15% of the slice of the pie. So it's just a, like I said, it's a really difficult thing. But again, that's why you have to love it. You have to love writing. You have to love the process. And like I say to my authors who I publish, because I don't anticipate that any of their books are going to be bestsellers, not because they don't deserve to be, but I just know the way the world is. I ask them, how many people have to read a book to make it worth publishing? If 1 or 2 or 5 people read it and it's really meaningful to them, does that mean it was all worth the effort? The effort of your writing it and the effort of my publishing it? And I think so. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. So we've published 40-some titles since 2012 when I started 12 Winters Press. Every one of them has lost money. So it's just the way that it is. And so I don't do it to make money. Obviously, you always hold out hope. You always hold out hope that some novel will get read by some literary agent somewhere, and they'll show it to James Cameron, and that'll be that. But that's the thing now. I mean, now we sort of measure literary success by whether it was made into a movie or not. Whether it made Netflix or whether it made the big screen or something. And even though I know better, I know that doesn't really mean it's a great book, but I fall into that trap myself sometimes. Are there other questions up there? Okay. All right. So Kindle, direct publishing, Amazon. I hate the thought of helping Jeff Bezos to buy another yacht or to take another trip to outer space, but there's no getting around his operation. The Amazon operation it works really well for self-publishing. So it used to be called Create Space, but a couple of years ago they kind of combined their Kindle operation with their Create Space paperback operation, and so now it's just KDP or Kindle Direct Publishing. But if you go to that site, again, you've got you can log in with your Amazon account if you've got an Amazon account, but otherwise you can just kind of establish an account, and they've got all these tools set up so that you can just start publishing your stuff. You can publish paperback books. Just within the last few months, they started publishing hardcover editions. I have not used them for that because I've been using a different publisher for that, and I really like their books, so I hate to take a chance on doing but they probably do a good job. And probably in a week, they'll own the company I've been using anyway, so it probably won't matter. But they do hardcover now. And then, of course, they do Kindle books. And so, like I said, they have a very, tailored online system. So you go through the process of uploading your manuscript in PDF. You upload. I design my own covers, so I always upload the cover file as a PDF too. But that's the one thing they will do for you. They will design a cover for you if you can't do that. And for that, they basically have templates, and you can choose templates. You can give them your own picture. You can use one of their stock pictures or whatever it might be. So if cover art, if art isn't your thing, Amazon KDP will do that. But anyway, you upload a cover. They produce a proof of your book. You can either get an electronic proof, so they just send you an email with a PDF, and you can look at it as a PDF, and if it looks fine, you approve the proof, and voila. They usually say that your book will be on sale within 72 hours, and I found it's usually within 24 hours, especially if it's a Kindle book. If it's an ebook, that is almost instantaneous. I mean, it's fast. It'll make your head swim how fast it is. And then Amazon is not only Amazon, but they have Amazon all over the world, right? So your book is not only available in the United States, it's available in all their other Amazon distributions around the world. And then independent bookstores, I don't know if you ever go to I don't know if you have a favorite indie bookstore like in Chicago or St. Louis or someplace like that, but they have a website. Usually you can buy books online, but if you, lo and behold, the books you publish through Amazon will also be available there, and so they can buy the book through your favorite indie bookstore. They get a little slice of the pie, but it's very, very easy. Now I say that because, like I said, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm my own editor, I'm my own graphic designer. I learned how to do all that stuff. So I guess if you don't know how to do that sort of thing, then that obviously presents a few challenges. But like I said, you can actually manipulate Word documents to look like book formats. And so even if you don't want to get into Adobe and all that sort of fancy stuff, you can use, if you know how to use Word, I mean, you can manipulate the margins, you can change the spacing of the lines. You can make it look just like a printed book page, and then save it as a PDF, and that'll work just fine. And so it really doesn't have to be that complicated. And then, like I said, for the ebooks, I used to do Nook books and Kindle books, but frankly, the Nook books hardly anybody ever bought, and so I just kind of stopped doing it because it just wasn't worth my time. I didn't feel like, so I just do Kindle because they have by far the lion's share of the ebook market, and I just use Word to create my ebooks. They're not fancy. And there is a software program you can download for free from the Kindle site that is apparently, well, it's tailor-made to make ebooks. So like the thing I don't have like tables of contents that you can click on and then go to that story or go to that chapter automatically. I'm not an e-reader, so unfortunately my bias kind of comes out in my not being that interested in publishing ebooks that are super sophisticated. I do like to have them for my authors, and they don't take that much time to produce if you don't do a lot of fancy stuff with them. So I do have them, and I'm glad we have them. But you could get a little bit more sophisticated with even ebooks if you wanted to. Now, like I said, Kindle Direct Publishing is just one of the platforms. Ingram Spark, I use another Ingram arm, I guess, called Lightning Source for a lot of my books, and I've actually been using that since the beginning. But Ingram Spark is another, if you go to the Ingram website, well, ingramspark.com it says, you'll see that it's pretty much like KDP. I mean, it's just, they do the same kinds of things. You can do paperbacks, hardcovers, ebooks. I did notice when I looked last night, they have, well, KDP has a video also, but it's more of an advertising video. But Ingram Spark actually has a bunch of courses on book design, on cover design, on editing, and you can take these self courses, and then that'll kind of help you to upload your book, to make your book and upload your book and so forth. Again, I have not used Ingram Spark, but it looks from that respect like it may be a little bit more user friendly than Kindle Direct Publishing. But again, I don't know that to be a fact. Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what writing resource books do you find helpful, if any?
Yeah, not really any. I mean, I used to read some stuff like that. There are some philosophical books on writing that I've read and kind of liked. Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, which is a really old book but she has a lot to say. Again, more philosophically, it's not very nuts and bolts kinds of things. Um, but even though I used to be a huge Stephen King fan, and I'm not so much of his writing anymore, although him as a person, as an author, I still really like, and his book on writing, I found pretty useful. So that gives some, that's both philosophical and does give some sort of practical advice on writing, which I think can be useful. But by and large, I don't read a lot of those. I find to me, the only way to really learn how to write is to write and to read as a writer. So when you read something you really like, to look at it and say, well, why do I really like that? What's happening on the page here that is really appealing to me, and how could I do that or something similar to that, in my own work or whatever. So a lot of repetition. One of my favorite stories about Hemingway, and there are a lot of stories about Hemingway, is that when he first went to Paris in the 20s, he got a job for, was it the Transatlantic Review, a literary journal, and he got the grunt job of retyping the manuscripts. A lot of the manuscripts were turned in written form, and so he had to type them up. And he said in retrospect that even though at the time it didn't seem like very exciting work, that really was important to him in terms of learning how to write, because he had to write word by word, sentence by sentence, some really great authors, Sherwood Anderson, and on and on and on. And that was really a good way for him to learn how to write himself. And so again, I think just writing is the best thing. I'm teaching a course right now in the novella and the long story in one of my MFA courses. And when I was in Albuquerque a couple months ago at a conference, the University of New Mexico Press was there, and they had a book on how to write the novella. And so I got a hold of a copy of that because I was curious. I said, well, to me, a novella is just a short novel. Maybe there's more to it than that, but basically it's not as long as a novel, so it's a novella. Again, could be more to it than that. But I thought, how do you write a novella as opposed to writing a novel? And it's interesting. The author has some interesting things to say, but I don't know that by the end of it you actually come out writing a novella. It's just a way to get you to think about writing and kind of approach the whole subject matter. So no, I don't read a lot of those kind of books, but a few of them, like I said, have done a few things for me that I think were worthwhile. So Book Baby, I put that in here because, and I had to check last night to make sure, when CreateSpace, the Amazon paperback company, when they first started, they offered editing services. So if you had a manuscript, but you're not sure of your editing skills, you could pay them to edit your manuscript. You could also pay them to design the book if you didn't know how to design the book and so forth. They stopped doing that a few years ago, but a place called Book Baby, which does publish paperback and hardcover editions, but they also offer editing services. So if that is a weak area for you and you don't have anybody that you can trust or that you know would edit your manuscript for you, you could pay Book Baby to do that. Now you could also go online and just Google it and find a lot of people out there who offer that service also, and maybe some of them are very good. There used to be somebody here locally who did that. I won't say her name in case she doesn't do that anymore, but I can maybe privately give you a name if you want to ask. But I did want to include Book Baby because in addition to being a self-publisher, they also have this service. And then, like I said, Smashwords is a site a lot of writers and a lot of publishers use because they just specialize in ebooks, but in all different kinds of varieties. So if you go to one of their books on their site, there'll just be a whole parade of different links you can click on if you want it downloaded as a PDF, if you want downloaded in this format, in that format. Again, I haven't used Smashwords. Again, that's probably my bias towards print, but I've had a couple of my books published by other presses that used Smashwords, and it seems to work just fine. So, any thoughts on any of that? Like I said, each of those, we could spend a whole morning talking about any of those things. But I was just going to very quickly, I brought in just a few kind of representative books just to kind of give you an idea, and maybe we can pass them around. Sorry for folks at home. guess I'll start with these. One of my authors is our very own John Paul Jaramillo, who teaches here at Lincoln Land, and we published his book Little Mocos a few years ago. We've got a new novel of his that we're just starting to work on. I promised John Paul we're starting to work on it. But no, he has a new novel coming out. But we published it in both hardcover, and then this was actually the first paperback through Amazon that I published. I had done paperbacks through Ingram, but not through Amazon. But we published his book in paperback format. But again, I'll just kind of pass these around. These are the two most recent books that 12 Winters has published. This is a book called The Term Between by Brady Harrison, who lives in Missoula, Montana. And it's a collection of short stories, really, really good stuff. I did this through Ingram Lightning Source. And like I said, there's just differences between the two, between like Ingram and PDK or Amazon, whatever you want to call it, KDP, I'm sorry. So for example, I don't know how easily you can see this, but one of the kind of fancy pants things I wanted to do, I love book design, and my dad was an artist, so I kind of get into that aspect of it too, is I wanted to do one of these kind of fancy things where the cover art is actually Brady's painting also. And I love the painting, so we used it as the cover art, but it's just a detail of it. So I wanted to basically include the whole painting as kind of the cover, the title page, and so forth. And I couldn't do it in the paperback. When I uploaded the pages, the file to Amazon, I don't know if it was a bot or something. I wanted it to run off the page, if that makes any sense. I wanted it to be like from edge to edge. Sorry, now I can't get the page. I wanted it to be from edge to edge. And when I uploaded to Amazon, they came back and said, "Oh, that image is too big. It runs off the page." And so they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me publish that file. So I want to do that, but there was like no human being to talk to, about that. Right. So I just fine. So I just did a kind of plain Jane, title page and so forth. So the hardcover edition is the only edition that has this kind of fancy thing, but it's a cloth edition. I mean, it's really nice quality. Feel free to take the book jacket off. And then last year we published this book, which I'm really, really proud of. Trees Grow Lively on Snowy Fields, Poems from Contemporary China. And it's a collection of 12 Chinese poets in translation, though. And so 4 different translators published 99 poems by 12 different Chinese poets. But the thing is, we did it as a dual language edition. So you've got the Mandarin on one side and the English on the other. Oh man, this was hard. We started working on this book in 2016 and it came out in 2020. For one, I don't read Mandarin, and I wanted it to be like a one-to-one thing. So like a lot of the poems are more than 1 page long. So wherever the English version stopped, I wanted the Mandarin to stop there too. So when you turn, and I don't read Mandarin, so basically it was more about the graphic look of the number, and then getting the Mandarin to reproduce correctly. I ended up having to do PDFs of all the Mandarin and then basically paste them into the design as a picture, not as text, if that makes any sense. So anyway, it was very, very difficult. But we ended up publishing this in a laminate edition and then also a paperback edition. And then, of course, there is an ebook, but the ebook doesn't have the Mandarin in it. It's just an English language edition. But I thought the laminate came out really nice, and it's perfect for library acquisition if only a library would acquire it. So those are my most recent books that I've published by others. This is my most recent novel, The Artist Spoke. And again, one of those things you can do if you're your own publisher. The photographs are also mine, and I've illustrated the book with my photographs. Well, I really felt like a lot of the photographs benefited from being published in color. And there's no way I could get another publisher to publish this book with color photographs but I'm in good with my publisher since it's me. So I did do a hardcover edition with color photographs, and it's a little pricey, but it's not much more than just a regular hardcover edition. But for the paperback edition, I just I went through Amazon for that, and I just did black and white. I again ran into that problem where I wanted the pictures to bleed off the page, but the robot wouldn't let me. So I had to clip the pictures a bit, but it's fine. No one knows but me, or I guess you now too. But anyway, so I oftentimes try to do something a little different in the paperback versus the hardcover. Like in Brady's book, for example, the paperback edition has an afterword by the author that the hardcover edition doesn't have, just to make them a little bit different or whatever. So anyway, this is my most recent book, The Artist Spoke. I normally do the matte finishes for the covers, but a few years ago we published this book, and this has actually been one of our better sellers. It's Clarissa's Disappointment, and by Megan Sullivan, illustrated by Daniel J. And Megan is a professor, but she specializes in working with families who have family members who are incarcerated, who are in prison, both kind of dealing with it when they're in prison and then when they're going to be coming out of incarceration and trying to integrate back into the family environment. That's kind of her area of expertise. So she wrote a children's story about that. And then in the back of it, there's also a bunch of resources for parents and teachers and counselors who are working with kids and adults who are in that situation. And so I really am proud of this book. But the illustrations, because it's a children's book, I think the color was really important. So we did publish it in full color, whereas so that did increase the cost a little bit. But this has been a really important book for us. And I did the cover in a glossy cover. I just thought that kind of worked better for that book. My wife has written some children's books, and so I've published her children's books, and I wanted to bring these in partly because when you publish a book, you have a lot of options in terms of the size of the book, and so a children's book is a little bit different usually, and so I went for kind of a square look. And one of the tricky things about Thank you. Publishing a children's book is it definitely relies on really good illustrations. And so we've always had to work with an artist or an illustrator to do that. Sorry, excuse me. And this is a book, Travis Finds the Truth, and Mickey Smith or Michelle Smith, who's a local artist, did the illustrations, did a really nice job. And so we published it in both a hardcover edition and a paperback edition. I think both through Ingram. But we really like the way this turned out. It's just got some beautiful artwork, and it really, speaks, to the story of Travis Finds the Truth. My wife's first book, though, Melissa Morrissey, has actually been one of our most popular children's books, and it's Shauna's Sparkle. And we got the local artist, Felicia Olin, who some of you may know, to do the illustrations. And again, they're just absolutely gorgeous, So we published this a few years ago. And our children's books, we publish in dyslexie font. We also did it in paperback. Dyslexie, a lot of times, kids, we discover they're dyslexic, or sometimes adults discover they're dyslexic, and it's just a processing issue when it comes to reading. And so this company, I think in Denmark, designed a font which is especially made to make it easier to read for people who are dyslexic. And so we purchased the right to the font from them, and so it's called Dyslexie. And so we publish all of our children's books in dyslexie font. They had some research that suggests it actually works, and there's some science behind it, which I could go into in more detail if anyone was interested. But that's something we've been doing is publishing our children's books in dyslexia. The last children's book I brought, it's near and dear to my heart, is about our dog Einstein. And so I'm actually captured as one of the characters. For some reason, they drew this guy who has no hair. I don't get it. And so here are these aren't different sizes necessarily, but these I brought in because they're kind of thin, and I think that's another issue that sometimes people run into. They've got something they want to be a book, but it's not very long. It's not 250 pages or something, and you can certainly publish thinner books. You sometimes can run into, like with Amazon, I think a book has to have at least 40 pages in order for the spine to be big enough to put the title on the spine. But if you don't care about that, then that's not too big of an issue. So I did bring in a couple of books that, just because mainly they're thinner. This is a book of poems and essays called The Necessary Poetics of Atheism. One of the contributors is Martín Espada, who just won the, I think, the National Book Award in poetry. But we published him as part of this a few years ago. And then I think I'm one of the few people, maybe Chuck and I, who read the Mueller report when it came out. And so I actually did a summary of the Mueller report because I thought maybe there are people who want to know what's in there, but they don't want to read all 450 pages of it. So I actually published a summary and analysis of the Mueller report, and nobody's read that either, by the way.
Where can you buy these books?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay, so they're available on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, the question was, where can you buy these books? And that comes up a lot. I think a lot of people assume because you're a small press publisher or self-published. But if you go through Ingram or Amazon or any of these publishers, they are available everywhere. I mean, except China. Because of China's restrictive government and all that, our books are not for sale in China. But otherwise, you can get them everywhere. And so there's no limitations in that regard. Yeah. Now again, bookstores don't tend to carry them because they don't have people coming in asking for them. But you can go to Barnes and Noble's website, you can go to Amazon, you can go to any bookstore and get them. I brought in just a few other books just because they're somewhat unusual, and so I was going to mention that. As I said, you can choose different sizes to have books published in. This is a book called Dean, 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 Dean by Jim O'Loughlin, and it's a collection of flash fiction, but they're all funny flash fiction stories. And because they're so short, I thought it'd be kind of cool if it was kind of a little book. I mean, just kind of a neat little book. So I published it in a little bit different format, and I thought it came out really neat. One of the series that we publish, which I think ought to be popular, but so far we've been having a hard time kind of breaking into the market. We have an author named Grant Tracy who has invented this detective named Hayden Fuller, who's an ex-hockey player, and all the stories are set in 1960s, either Toronto or the last novel was set in Montreal because Grant is from Canada. And so last year we published a collection. We published the first two Hayden Fuller novels that had already come out from us. We republished them as part of this collection, but then we published a brand new novel, a novella, and a short story, and called 5 Hard Bites. But when I went to publish it on Amazon, it was too long. I didn't realize that Amazon had, I forget, like 722 pages or something, was like the biggest book you could publish on Amazon, the CreateSpace KDP thing. So luckily, when I went to Lightning Source, which is the Ingram company that we use, their limit was like 1,200 pages. So I ended up publishing this paperback through them only because of its length. So. Now I hope this next book doesn't offend anyone, but with the popularity of the 50 Shades of Grey books, we decided to try our hand, so to speak, at literary erotica. And so a young lady who lives in Paris, or at least as far as I know, she still lives in Paris, she wrote this little book called City of Broad Shoulders, and I wanted to publish it in a little bit different format, maybe so it would be easy to tuck into your pocket if you didn't want to be walking around at the church luncheon with a copy of this or something. And this last book I brought in, this is my book again, but this is my doctoral dissertation, somewhat updated and changed a little bit. But I had a publisher publish my doctoral dissertation, but they only published it in hardcover, and they were charging like $280 a copy. And so it was really hard to get a hold of.
Yeah.
And so I kept having people pretty regularly contact me, a lot of times from other countries, because they wanted to read my book for their own scholarship, but they couldn't get a hold of it. And so I published a paperback edition, but I used the original WordPress files. That's the main reason I wanted to bring this in, because I didn't want to redo the index. If I did it in a different format, the pagination would probably be different. So I kept the index the same. So this is actually done through a WordPress document that I manipulated, and then it also is a little bit bigger size than most of the books we publish. So like I said, I brought these in mainly just to give you a little bit of a sense of the variety and also the quality. I mean, I'm very, very proud and pleased with our books. Like I said, the cloth cover editions are beautiful, and they're very well made. I mean, they're going to outlive us all. The paperback editions, I mean, you can price them whatever you want to price them, but I always price them literally as inexpensively as I can, because I don't want the price of a book to be holding it back. Now, Kindle books, the least you can charge for a Kindle book is 99 cents. And then if somebody is part of the Kindle Direct program or something, they can actually read it for free if you allow them to, and I always do. So I always check off free if you're part of that program, otherwise 99 cents. Some of our older Kindle books are a little bit more than that because at the time I wasn't as mindful of trying to get it into as many hands as possible. But generally speaking, I try to make our books as inexpensive as possible, again, just because of the fact that I don't want the price to be a reason that people aren't buying our books. Now, one other issue I'll mention here, if you do get into book publication, when you publish a book, they don't do this at Amazon, but they do it at Ingram, and maybe BookBaby does it, or I'm sorry, maybe Ingram Spark does it, maybe BookBaby does it too, I don't know. But one of the questions they ask you when you're setting up the title is, can this book be returned? And if you say no, then do you want it destroyed or do you want it sent to you? And the idea of destroying a book just really hurts. So when I first started publishing, I always said, no, don't destroy it. Yes, you can return it. Don't destroy it, send it to me. But here's what happens. If a bookstore, let's say, buys 25 copies of a book, we only make about $1 a copy, roughly. It depends, but keeping the math simple. So great. So we just made $25. Well, it costs the printer a lot more to publish that book. So if after 6 months they've only sold like one copy of the book, they'll want to return all 24 copies and get their money back, right, from the distributor. Well, then the printer will turn around and charge us the cost of printing the book. So we made 25, but now we're being charged 150 for books we don't really want anyway because we got no place to sell them. And then throw in shipping with that because I didn't want them destroyed. And so now I've got shipping charges. So now instead of making $25 on that book, I've now lost like 170 or something. So a few years ago, and thank God nobody bought like 100,000 copies of a book and then returned them when I was at that point in my naivete. So now I make it so no book can be returned. And that really limits bookstores wanting to carry your book because they can't even return it. And I get that, but at the same time, I can't afford to have people carry the book for a few months and then turn around and return them and charge me for the cost of printing the book that I have no place to sell it at. So I've gone a lot longer than what you had in mind, but
That's fantastic. We've lost a few people on Zoom who obviously had other commitments, which
That's
is
fine.
also, that's fine. But yeah, very, very informative, lots of good information, and yeah, I'm really happy we had to do this.
Well, thank you for having me. And like I said, any one of these, there's a lot more to say. So if you have some specific questions about getting your poems published or about this, that, other. I saw some ears go up, I thought, when I mentioned that your group could have its own little website and its own little journal. I think that's something to think about.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to, I mean, it's not something you need a lot of expert help with, but if you had any questions, I'd be happy to help you with that.
Super.
Thank you at home. Thank you here.
Thank you.